Bonjour à tous, hello everyone, how are you doing? Welcome back fellow adventure seekers. But this time it is not going to be one of my typical videos where I'm showing an amazing landscape or different countries, different cultures, deserts and mountains and waterfalls and everything. This time it is going to be a more nerdy topic. Ever since I put up this image in social media, I get a lot of questions on how this image was done, what kind of equipment was used, how I post-processed, why it looks different than my older astrophotographies. A lot of things I have explained in the description of the image, but I know this type of topics can be a little bit confusing. So today I decided that I will make a video and explain everything that I know end to end. Now I have learned almost everything of that from social media, so I think it is a good time to give back something. Now all those information are very much available, so why do I need another video? Because what I found is that most of those information are a little bit scattered, not available in one place, and there are some practical problems that I faced which I did not find a solution from the social media directly. I kind of find out some part by my own analysis and thinking, so I will also add that in this video. Now one thing that is quite important is that this video is not for a complete beginner. You have to really understand a little bit about the exposure triangle, a little bit about astrophotography, shutter speed and link of shutter speed with the movement of star, etc. etc. Now if you have those understandings, everything else I will explain in very detail. I will probably not go into the nitty-gritty of the equipment because there are many very good videos out there which are explaining how to use those equipments, and I'm going to put the link of those videos, the ones I found very useful, in the description below. But I will give you an overall of what I used and how I process and what type of planning I do, and we'll go from there. Before we get into the nitty-gritty details of landscape astrophotography, I must clarify the scope. As you might be knowing, astrophotography are mainly of two types: deep sky astrophotography and landscape astrophotography. Now in this video, I'm not going to cover anything to do with deep sky because that is a completely different world. Even though I like to see those amazing images, I do not have any experience of taking those pictures. So that is completely out of scope. In this one, I'm only going to talk about landscape astrophotography, means wide field astrophotography. So as we're talking about wide field astrophotography, I think we should start with the most important part: composition and finding out the right location and right environment. Like all other landscape photography, the composition is probably one of the most important part of the wide field astrophotography as well. Now the way I see it is that I believe that the wide field astrophotography is very much like capturing a sunset, where the Milkyway or the sky is very much like the enhancer of your picture. Now if you go to a place where there is beautiful sunset, and if you take only the picture of the cloud and the sun, it's not really a good picture. You have to mix that with a beautiful foreground, some kind of leading lines, some kind of good subjects, etc. And the Milky Way and or taking picture of the wide field astrophotography is exactly the same. So you have to think about that because that is something that gets overlooked very often. So you get the beautiful picture of a Milky Way, but the foreground or the overall image is not that good. It is not going to be considered, or you will not find that as good image as another image which has a good subject or a good leading line or good foreground and things like that. So remember that, because it happens very often that when we see those type of beautiful sky, we kind of forget about all other photographic elements and we start concentrating about the sky only. Now the Milky Way in a picture is the enhancer, like a sunset in a picture. So please remember that and make sure that you always look for a good composition. Otherwise, unlike the sunset where the cloud formation is always different, Milky Way is always the same. If you go to the same place the next day, it will be the same. If another person goes to the same place at a similar time of the year, this year, next year, in next 20 years, it will be the exactly same. So that's why what makes your image much better and unique is when you mix that with a beautiful composition. Let's talk about planning now, because to do wide field astrophotography properly, you have to do a lot of planning. Now, like any other landscape photography, planning of the weather is as important as anything else. Now, there are some other pieces that you have to plan as well. For example, the phase of the moon, because if it is a full moon day, then it will be too bright for you to see the Milky Way. Or maybe you want to just photograph a place with the moonlight and something. So this depends a little bit on your requirement. So that planning is quite important to understand the moon phase. And the second part is that the location of the Milky Way on the sky, so that you can understand when it is aligning with your choice of landscape or your choice of composition. And the last part, which is probably the darkness of the sky, because the darkest is the sky, the brightest is the Milky Way. You have less problem of the light pollutions and everything, which is like a very common problem in the civilized world today. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to show you the tools that I use to do my planning for any kind of Milky Way core or any kind of landscape astrophotography. So the first one is definitely Google Map, where I put all my locations and mark them so that it can be used easily. The second one is called Photographer's Element, and in this one I can see the time of the sunset, sunrise, what time the Milky Way core will align to which part of the sky, etc. There is a very good function here where you can actually say which one you want. You can have all of them. You can just say I want the sun or the moon or the Milky Way. So for this tutorial, as we are going to use Milky Way, we can see that, and we can clearly see where the Milky Way will be aligned at what time of the day. The next one is Meteo Blue, that I use for weather forecast. Here I can get 7 days forecast or 14 days forecast. 14 days forecast is more or less like an indication. It is not super accurate, but the 7 days forecast is much better, especially next few days is normally quite accurate. On top of that, I can get an hourly forecast, which tells me about rain, the wind speed, the wind direction, and many other things. Next one is Celerium. With this one, I can actually go and put the locations that I'm looking for. I can zoom in and I can perfectly point to the location that I need to see the night sky of. And from there, actually, I can go and see when and where the Milky Way will be. For example, I was there during July, so I could easily see at what part of the sky the Milky Way will go through. The final one is the light pollution map. This one gives me the information about light pollution in that location where I am going, because if it is quite light polluted, then I might carry some light pollution filters and stuff. Now here there are some data that you can find. For example, if you go to this 2015 reading, you can find here the Bortle scale. However, as it is from 2015, it is not very accurate. So I actually look at the 2022 data, where basically this value that tells you how much light pollution it is. 0 means it is quite dark. Whereas if I go to some other place which is a bit more light polluted, you can see what is the situation there. It says 0.5, and it also tells you from 2012 how the light pollution at this place has kind of increased. So you can see that this was in 0 at 2012, but with the population increasing, it is getting a little bit more light polluted. Good thing is that all those applications are also available in mobile, which is very handy when you are on the move. Now let's talk about equipment. I'm going to show you the equipment that I have used for that particular picture, and going to show you a quick demo of how to set it up. But I'm going to put a more detailed video of how to use those equipments in the description below. First thing you need to do a good landscape astrophotography is a tripod. Now on top of that, normally I take out the head and I put a leveling base. I have added in the description the details of my tripod and my leveling base, but to be honest, there are many companies who build them. So as long as they are stable, steady, and can carry the weight of the equipment, you are good with that. You don't really have to use exactly this one. This one I use because I like it. It's durable and lasts long. So then I normally do a good alignment of the base, because the equipment I'm gonna use is gonna rely on a good base that is very much aligned to the ground. After that, I will use as a tracker Benro Polaris. Now one thing that I should clarify, that this Benro Polaris has some prerequisite and good amount of detail for setup. In this video, I'm not gonna cover all those things because there are already in internet very detailed videos for that. I will put the details of that or some of those videos in the description below. Please have a look. But I'm gonna show you some practical problems. First thing is that if you can see that when I try to put that on the leveling base, I can't, because this part is extended from the base of this Polaris, and when the base is bigger than this little Polaris base, it gets stuck. Now there is one little equipment which is like a little enhancer that you can put on top of tripod and on top of the leveling base or anything that you have on the tripod, and you can put that one here. Unfortunately, I didn't know that when I purchased it, so it was a little bit of problem. So what I do is that I double click this, and it takes some time, a little bit of time. It's not perfect, to be honest. It's still quite buggy. So sometime it takes ages to start. So once I do that, you can see it is moving and it's creating a little bit of a gap. And once the gap is created, I'm fine to put that on top of the tripod. On top of the leveling base. So once this is done, there is also this little extra cable. To be honest, I keep that on there because I'm not notorious on losing things. This extra cable, because in this setup, this upper part, which is this thing here, is different or separately sold than the motorized head itself. And this part doesn't have any power, so the only way to power this is using this cable, and this cable is the communication between the head, between this the Astro unit and the motorized head. You will find all this information in the video that I have put in the description below, so I will not get into the detail of that. So once this is done, what I do is that I put my camera on top of it. Now another thing where I found interesting or problematic or kind of information I wish I would have had before, that is, there is a little extender that you can find. It is also from Benro. Unfortunately, like many other things, that is also not available in Switzerland. I put the picture of it and some link in UK and US on where to buy it. I have actually ordered one to bring from UK. So one of my colleagues will bring it, but I don't have it on my hand yet. So what that does is that kind of creates a little gap between these two, and the top of that is smaller. So once you put that, this little side doesn't get stuck with the base of the Benro Polaris, because that is of the same size of the base of here. So that is an equipment I wish I knew before. Now you know that. So if you are buying the Benro Polaris, make sure that you buy that piece of the gear. It cost, I think, like $20 or $25 or something, but that's gonna be giving you quite a lot of convenience than the setup I have. Another thing is that on top of this plate doesn't have a quick release clamp. So that basically means that when you have to put the camera, you have to screw that in your camera. If your camera has already a rail bracket or something, then remove that, screw that in is a very inconvenient thing. On top of that, as that can only be screwed in the bottom of the camera, you can only take pictures that is in landscape mode. You cannot take picture on the vertical mode. So what I did is that I had this, again, really right step quick release clamp with me and some screws that is gonna fit this one and a little bit of extender of all this stuff. So I added this quick release clamp on top of this quick release plate that Benro has supplied. Now if you don't have it, then please make sure that you get one, because otherwise it's quite inconvenient to every time screw and unscrew different parts of the camera. So now I can easily put this one here in the landscape way, or I can just put it in portrait orientation. So based on what I want to do, if I want to take a portrait based shot, or I want to take a bigger part of the Milky Way or bigger part of the sky, I can decide the way I want to use it, and everything works fine after that. Now let's talk about the camera. It's a Nikon D850 with a Sigma 28mm Art 1.4 lens. Now this camera is hydrogen alpha modified. I will talk a little bit with you about my experience of hydrogen alpha modification and whether you should modify your camera or not, because there are some pieces to talk about that. Now, why I use this camera? Can this be any other camera? Honestly, it can be any camera. Why I use this is because if you have seen my old R5 versus D850 video, you would know that I have stopped using the D850 for quite some time. So this camera was just sitting there eating dust on my curve. So I just used that one to do the Astro Modification. Now I have spent probably few years thinking about it, whether I should mod the camera or not, because once you mod the camera, the resale value of it goes down dramatically. I don't think there are many people out there who wants to buy a second-hand modded camera. On top of that, once you mod the camera, the automatic white balance of the camera is completely messed up. So all pictures you are going to take outside the normal regular astrophotography that you are going to do with that, the landscape astrophotography, are going to be messed up. Now, yes, you can still set up your white balance manually and fiddle around with things, or you can say that, look, I'm taking picture in RAW, so I can always fix that in post. These are all fine. But me as a photographer, I want to have a very good understanding of what I am photographing from the back of the camera itself. Yes, it's not always exactly the same. I may not process it exactly the same, but it still gives you a good notion of what you are photographing. That gets completely messed up. So it's a very personal thing on that. On top of that, you can always say, yeah, but a lot of people take picture of Milky Way and the core of the Milky Way or this type of landscape astrophotography without the camera being modded. So what's the big deal? Honestly, my experience after doing the modification is that it is not the same. The color that you get, the color that you lose from those hydrogen alpha from a stock camera, reproducing exactly the same color in post-processing is almost impossible. Most of the people, what they do is that they put a little bit of red and pink, where the Milky Way become a little bit red or pink, but it is very much visible that that's not coming out of the camera, or that is not how it exactly is. When you put the Astro Modified camera, hydrogen alpha filter camera for the same picture, it's a completely different story. The Milky Way looks very different, and your pictures are automatically kind of distinguished with hundred of other people taking pictures. So there is advantage of that on my eye. Now whether you should do it or not is a different thing. Now what I started doing is that, at least that is something that is good on all the cameras that are available. I can't talk about everything else. I can talk about Canon and Nikon because that's what I normally use. There is something called custom white balance. No, it is not that K stuff where you can set up the white balance properly, because the problem is that it also changes the tint. You can set your white balance, the color temperature, but adjusting the tint is quite difficult. One thing that is good in Nikon is that they provide already an existing image that you can use to set up. I will give you a little demonstration of that later. And in Canon, you basically have to take a picture of it. So basically what you can do is that you can take a gray card, you take a picture of that one and set that picture as your kind of reference point of the pre-selected white balance. That gives you quite close to what you would normally get from a normal stock camera, but it's still not 100% accurate or not as good as a stock camera. So to me, I am very happy that I did this modification, but there is no real yay or nay answer for that. You have to choose and decide it yourself. In Nikon D850, to set the custom white balance, you need to go to the white balance option under the photo shooting menu. Then you need to go all the way down to PRE or preset manual. Then inside PRE, choose D1 and press OK. That's it. Your custom white balance is set. On top of the gear I have shown you already, I also had a Sigma Art 14mm f1.8 lens with me in Namibia. I wish to buy a few other things as well. For example, I wish to buy a Samyang 10mm 3.5 lens. I have a Canon version of it, and that is amazing. If you want to do a kind of a swiping sky where you want to include everything, that lens is one of a kind. Or if you want to do some kind of star trails, it can include a big part of the sky, so it is much easier to do trails with that. The Canon version is not very useful for me because I will be mostly using the Nikon for doing the astrophotography now on. So it makes sense for me to buy a Nikon version of it and sell off the Canon version. I also would like to buy a Sigma Art 40mm f1.4 lens because, you know, on the internet, most of the time if you go there, you mostly see white filled Milky Way pictures, like everything between 14 to 24. And that becomes quite monotonous. No, I do not do photography to show to the world or to get fame out of it or something. I do photography for myself. But the thing is that I love to take unique pictures. Now, as I am also part of this social media nuisance, I do see many of those pictures, and it's a good thing, right? It gives you idea, it gives you a perspective of what type of picture you can take, and different things, show you places. So it's not always a bad thing, but the thing is that those type of focal length images have become a norm for us. So when I see a similar image that is taken by me, even if it is a good image, I feel like, yeah, it's not very different. Whereas a different focal length, a 28 or 40 especially, will probably give me that feeling that I could get much detail of the Milky Way, and I'll see less amount of similar pictures out there on the world. So something I want to see. I have no idea if I can carry all those equipments, like 4 lenses of Nikon and the camera and all this Canon stuff, because I have to carry the Canon stuff for all other kind of photography and the videography. I have no idea if I can carry them or not, but that's more or less my wish to complete my astrophotography equipment kit. Another thing I want to do is that I want to go back to some of those Swiss good Milky Way locations and recapture them with the new setup. Anyway, more on that later. Now we have talked a lot. Now let's go back to the digital darkroom and see how to process those images. Now before we do that, there are a few things as a disclaimer very important to tell. Number one is that you will need probably a little bit of basic understanding of post-processing before watching this one, because I'm not gonna get into the detail of what a layer is and how to create the layer or what the selection mask is and all these things. So you should have basic understanding of Photoshop, and I'm also going to use some other tools like this Capture One and some other stuff. Don't worry about it. You can probably do everything that I'm gonna do on those softwares in other places. Concentrate on not on what is the value of a certain slider I put, but the concept behind that, right? And second part is that the processing of astrophotography is a very, very personal choice, like any other photography, like also landscape photography as well, right? So don't get bogged down too much about how much contrast I put in and how much brighter my Milky Way core is, how much dimmer the color is and all this kind of stuff, right? This is very much my personal choice. This is how I like to see my pictures. You can have your own choice and you should be more or less sticking to that one. It should not be completely unnatural or out of the world. Honestly, if that's what you like, fair enough, you are probably okay with that, right? There will be some people who will like that one. So it's very much personal choice and stick to that one. Not concentrate much on how much values I'm putting or how much the curve I'm pushing. You can take that methodology and fine tune it for the way that you like it. I have seen people who are taking picture of a beautiful sunset in monochrome or black and white because they like it, right? So there is no right or wrong into this one. So important is that you enjoy and learn the process and the procedure and then fine tune it the way you want it. So enough talking, now let's go back to digital darkroom and do some magic. One thing that I must mention is that when I go to the mountain, I normally do not carry this much bigger Benro Polaris tracker. I rather carry this much smaller move tracker, which is a very basic tracker with a little laser beam to point to the Polaris to do the alignment, do the polar alignment. Now I couldn't even think of using that in the South Pole because that would have been very hard because there is no Polaris on the South Pole and the polar alignment on South Pole is much more complicated. So there this Benro Polaris was really a lifesaver. However, the size and weight advantage is really prominent when you are carrying a 20 kg backpack on a steep mountain terrain. However, the quality of it and the ease of use of the Benro Polaris is kind of becoming difficult choice to leave that one home and taking this lighter one. I will see what happens. If I'm going somewhere dedicatedly to do astrophotography, I will probably still carry the Benro Polaris. But if I'm going there to do an overall video and do landscape where astrophotography is a little part of it, I will probably still use, at least on the northern hemisphere, the move, which works pretty well even if it is not as good as the other one. But again, the price, size, weight, you get what you pay for. Welcome to my digital darkroom. Now before we jump into the different softwares and start doing the post-processing, I should clarify one thing. All the good astrophotos, all the good landscape astrophotos that you see on different digital forums or exposition or other places, they are all composites. We just do not have the technology available today that can do a good landscape astrophoto with only one image. So of course my process will not be different. It will be very similar. There are many different ways of doing it. Some people take the foreground and the sky at different time of the day with different focal length. Some people use the stacking to get rid of noise from the sky. Some do tracking to do the same. Some do stacking and tracking to do that, something that we will be doing, tracking and stacking. So there are different ways to do that, but at the end, they are never a single frame. It is just not possible to do that, right? So if you are a purist who thinks that if an image is coming from multiple images, that is not really a photography, that is more digital playground or digital whatever, and it does not fit your way of thinking about photography, then probably landscape astrophotography is not your cup of tea. You can never find that type of beautiful result that you normally can get from any other images with single frame. So with that one out of the table, let's talk about the second part, and that is the look of the Milky Way image. Now you can see that there are different people. Some, the Milky Way image is a little bit reddish, some is very contrasty, some is very dull and a bit less contrasty. These are all kind of personal choices. There is no right or wrong in that one. The good thing is that I'm going to show you a technique where by adjusting the slider a little bit differently, you can get all different looks that you are looking for, but do not get that much bogged down about a certain look or others. It is really your choice and the way you like it. Another person might like it differently, and there is nothing wrong about that. And on top of that, I will be mostly doing global adjustments in many places except few exceptions. I do not have the time or the patience to actually go and dodge and burn every dust clouds and every section of the Milky Way. So I will not do that, and I will probably show you a rather more consistent workflow that I have kind of built with different forums and discussions and videos and books and everything, which now I feel I can use and repeat the same type of results again and again. So with that, let's jump into the real post-processing. To start with, let's look at the images that we will be using. As you can see from the extension, there are 3 images which are for the sky taken with a Nikon D850, whereas there are other 6 images that are taken with a Canon R5 as a foreground. The reason behind is that I do not have a super wide angle lens. This is taken with a 10mm lens. I don't have it for Nikon. At the same time, I did not have time to take the images sequentially, so I parallelized the process a little bit and taken the foregrounds with Canon, whereas the sky was on a tracker on the Nikon. So with that, let's go to the first step of the post-processing. We'll do the first part of the post-processing in this Capture One Pro. Now, I could have used Lightroom, there is no problem with that. It's just that I started using Capture One recently and I really like it, the way it renders the files. I like the experience of this. On top of that, I felt that the Capture One does a better job with the Canon files than what the Lightroom does. So we will not do a lot here. What we will do here is that we will go to the adjustments and we will just bring down the purple tint a little bit towards green and probably make it a little bit warmer. That looks about right. And we will do a very slight vignette correction, something like 0.5. Then we will do exactly the same. I will copy the setting from this first file, take it to the second two and just apply them. And that's it. I will not do anything else on that. That is good enough for me. Now this thing you can already do also in the Lightroom. As I said, that is just preference. There is not much of a difference on that. I'll create a folder here which is called TIF, and that's where I will export all these images. Now I will just do a Control A, which select all the images. Go here, export. Here I will make sure that the folder is correctly chosen. Yes, it is. Select folder, make sure it is TIFF here, make sure it is 16-bit. I like the Adobe color profile, and export. It will take few seconds to export the images and it is done. Now I will also do some of the processing of these other images, the foreground images, and keep them ready so that I can close the Capture One and only concentrate the processing in Photoshop. Now I will again not do a lot here. What I will do is that I will bring up the that looks a little bit bluish. This looks something a little bit more stable. You see there are a lot of hot pixel here. This is the specialty of high resolution camera with a longer amount of exposure. It's an 8-minute exposure. So what I will do is that I will increase the shadow on this little bit. Don't worry about those hot pixels. We will take care of that at certain point of time. So I will increase that to something like 60. I will reduce the highlight a little bit to bring them a bit flat or make them a little bit flat. I will also go there and improve the vignetting of it, something like that. And maybe I take a little bit of contrast back with this. This auto feature here works fantastically well. So I really like that. So then what I will do is that I will make it, I will try to see if what auto does here is not bad. I'll probably say it's -2, it's 4000. And then the only thing I will do is that copy this setting, select those, paste them there, and paste them in the other ones as well. And then we will go one by one, some of them, like for example this one, this setting is a bit too much. I will reduce this one a little bit here, probably reduce the highlight a bit more, something like this. For this is the same, we can reduce the highlight a little bit more, and you should always choose the auto setting separately because it does not copy the auto setting properly between different images. This one is probably my foreground as well, but you see it's a high ISO 64000 image, so there is a lot more noise than the other ones, but we will clean it up. Here is the same. I do not need so much light on the foreground, so I reduce the shadow, I reduce the highlight a little bit more, and this is probably what I will use because this one looks a little bit better from noise point of view. So that's probably what I'm going to use for the post-processing. So if I compare this one and this one, that one, the light looks better to me. So that is the image where I will take the human from. That human is me, by the way. And this one is the same. I reduce the shadow a little bit and also reduce the highlight a little bit. Then we take all of them and again do the export. The export should remember my last setting, so I shouldn't have to bother about this, and just do the export. Again, it will take few seconds to do the export, and that's it. I do not need this application anymore. I hate having too many windows open, so I will just close this. Now let's go to Photoshop and do the work. We will start our processing of the sky image first. So let's open them in Photoshop. And the first thing we will do is that we will do a bit of noise reduction. So there are a lot of hot pixels in this as well because this is a 4-minute exposure. You can see from the dark frame there is quite a lot of noise. So what we will do, we will copy that dark frame. So from here we will do select all, edit, copy, and we go to this one, edit, paste. Now in this we will do only one thing, that is we will change this blending mode to subtract there. So with this what you will see is that there are, you see this, these hot pixels, they will be gone with this, but sometimes it creates a little bit of a dark patch there, but probably that is better than a red patch like that. So I will just flatten this, Control S, save this one. Then I will do the same thing with the other one. I will open this, copy this, Control A, Control C, Control V, change the blend mode to subtract, flatten, save. I can now close this dark pixel. Now I will take this second image and put it into the first one. Now that is where we will do our stacking. So these images are taken with a Astro modified D850, which I said to you already, and these are taken with ISO 400, f4 and 4 minutes of exposure. Why 4 minutes? Because that is what I found that this Sigma lens is very good at. You can see even in the extreme corner there is a little bit stretching of the star, but there is absolutely no coma for this. The stretching is because it is still a wide angle, so you still see a little bit of stretching in the corner, but if you see in the center, the stars are absolutely point sharp, and I like that. So as the images, if you go inside, you will see there is a little bit of misalignment. Even though they are tracked together exposure by exposure, you can always find out this little misalignment, but for this Photoshop is good enough to align them properly. So we do align, auto align, and Photoshop will do the job for us. So now if you look at it, bam, they are all aligned properly. Now we will select these two, put a shift and select the other image, then both of them will be selected. Then you do a right click and convert to smart object. Then you go to layer, smart object, stack mode, and you use median. This is a stacking for reducing noise. Now honestly what I found is that a single image that is taken in ISO 400 or 800 does not really require a lot of work for stacking. It is already clean enough from the beginning. So this is our first image, this is our first start. I will save this one and I will leave it like this. I will not touch this one. Every other work I will do it on the layers on top of it. So I do Ctrl J or Command J to create a layer, and I will create two of them. The first one I will name as starless, and the second one I will name as star. Now in this starless, what we will do is that we will get rid of these stars, because you can see that these stars are a little bit disturbing sometimes, because there are many of them, and on top of that, if I push the image, if I make it brighter, the contrast and everything, then the stars being much more brighter than this fainted part of the Milky Way, it will actually blow out much quicker than the other part. So that's why we will process the galaxy and the star separately. Now to separate these two, we have an application which is a paid application that is called Star X Terminator. I will put the link of this application in the description below. You can have a look at it. It is a fantastic application. I've used it for some time now and it's very good, and it makes the process much more simpler. So press OK and the work will start. Here I should mention one thing. I have quite a powerful computer, and you can see that the CPU immediately goes to 100%. This is really heavy, and even with the i9 that is running in 4.68 gigahertz, it does take some time. It's a pity that it doesn't use a lot of GPU. I also have a powerful GPU, but it only uses 20, 30%, 40% of that, which is not good. If it was using much more GPU, things would have probably done faster. But if you have a slower computer, this thing might take fairly long. So now I have to wait for a little bit, and I don't want you to wait for that 5-10 minutes it will take. So I will fast forward this process. There you go. Here comes our one part of the starless Milky Way. So you can see there is a star. So now what we will do is that we will isolate the star. The best way to isolate the star is by changing the blending layer to difference. Then I will just make another copy of it, Ctrl J, and merge that to below. And I will change the text of that to stars only. I put this one down for now because most of the work we will do from this. But we should do the first thing first. You see here, this is a sensor dust. So let's get rid of that first. So we select this healing brush, we go there and give it a click, and job done. Now the first thing would be to put a curve adjustment and make the whole scene a little bit brighter. So for that we click here and just drag up to make the image brighter. We will not delete any of the layers so that it stays a little non-destructive. That way we should be able to go back to any of the layers that we want. Let's change the name of it, brighten. Next part is to manage the colors. This to me is a bit too purple because of this H alpha modified camera, but as this is a raw image, it's very easy to fix. First thing we'll do is to go to the green channel and click here and increase the green a little bit. That takes out a bit of blue and bit of purple. So you can see the purple part is gone. Now we'll go to the blue and we will reduce that a little bit. Finally, we'll go to the red. We'll reduce that tiny bit, and this time we will not reduce it from the highlight. So we create a nice S curve for the red, and that brings a little bit of blue back. So we call it as color correction. Finally, we will put a little S curve to get some contrast in the image. And this is the part that is where things will change a little bit based on your own choice. Now you can go to something very crazy like this, or you can keep it a bit subtle. Now I want something and like something that is in between. So I will do something that is a bit stronger and then play with this opacity to go down or up a bit. I would say that keep it a little lighter, because when we'll merge this back, we might need to do some more adjustments on the contrast. So for now, I will leave it somewhere, probably here around 60. And I will name this one to contrast. I put them in a group just so that I can understand what it is. Now what I will do is that I will change them and do merge visible for this. Copy this one. Actually, there is a easy way of doing it. Control Shift something something. I always forget that, so I do this. So basically what I do to remember that is that I uncheck all the layers that I do not need to flatten. Then I just say merge visible. And then I do a Control A, Control C, and Control Z to get the old one back and just paste that on top of it. Now we will do another adjustment here, which is filter, camera raw filter. I like this one because here you can do very subtle adjustments. I will increase this warm a little bit, make it a bit more. I reduce the purple patch a little bit more from this. Next part will be here, where I will just adjust the shadow so that the purple on the shadow is gone. Now I will add a little bit of dehaze, because that kind of makes things pop a little bit, and maybe a little more. And when you do the dehaze, you will see that you lose a lot of details on the shadow. So probably go back and pull up the shadow a bit more. And as we do that, we lose a bit of blue. So you add a bit more yellow there. Finally, we will do a bit of noise reduction. Something like 15 here. Same thing there. 20. And there you go. Things are done properly. That looks all right. Not a lot of noise. And we are good to go. Press OK. And you can see before after. It's quite good. Here I would just put camera raw. Now there is one thing we have to do, that is, remember those little black dots that was created because we took away some of those little hot pixels. We'll just fix them quickly, the big ones. There will be few of them. We don't have to do a lot here because when the stars will come back, many of those things will get covered. But it makes sense to fix the bigger ones because sometimes that can cause a little bit of discomfort, and it is much more harder to fix it after having the stars. One thing important to say, that you can see that there is this below part. This is a little bit rough, and this came from the realignment of the images, but we will not fix that. We will just leave it as it is, because what we will do is that when we will stack this image, we will just make sure that this part of the image is not part of the final output, and that's it. Now, some of them are not really coming from the removal of the hot pixels. Some of them are coming from the preparation of the starless, but it's a good idea to get rid of some of them. Anyway, if it is from the star, there is not much of a problem because the star will come back and sit there. But it makes sense to kind of get rid of at least the big ones, because as I said, it is much more harder to fix it once the stars are there. I think that is more or less it. So our part of the Milky Way is ready. Now what we will do is we'll take our star layer and put it on the top, and we'll use one of these: lighten, screen, color dodge, linear color. You can use any of them. The one I like the most is screen, but I know that a lot of people like the color dodge, some like the lighten one. So I will stick to my favorite one, which is the screen. Now, as you have noticed, if I go back to my original image and remove all of them, this was intentionally underexposed to keep the colors in the star. Hence, I will actually brighten the star a little bit. And the best way to do that is by going there, you do an Alt click. That will make sure that you have this type of little arrow that is going down, which will only impact this below layer and not anything else. And once we are here, we can just increase the brightness of the star, and we can decide how much we want to increase to get a little bit of pop. And then, of course, always experiment with some of them just to make sure that what comes out as a final output is something that you like. Let's save this. There is one final thing that we can do. We can flatten this. Again, I will do my same stuff and put that and say processed. And there is a little plugin that is called Star Spikes, which kind of creates a little kind of star kind of effects. Now, this is not mandatory. You can keep it subtle. I like this one, kind of 1 or 2 star effects, looks good. So I will create one. However, I will keep that kind of subtle Maybe I will reduce the opacity to something like 60, so that it's just very subtle. And I will not delete the original version of it. The reason behind is that if by chance I do not like it, I can always copy this one instead of that, and that way I can basically have two versions of this. So let's save this and go back for our foreground. So we will close that just to keep things a bit clean, and we will open these foreground layers. What is very important is to choose your base layer. To me, this is my base layer. And what I like from this one is the contrast that it creates there. So I do a Control A, Control C, and Control V here. I will create a layer by clicking Alt and this button. This will create a dark layer, completely black. That means nothing on the top layer will be visible. And then I will take a mask and do something that is much softer, and I'll keep the opacity to a little bit less, like 30, and do some paintings here. So what I will take from this is this above part mainly, because I like that reddish tint from there. So I will take that part of it. Well, let's see. Yeah, it helps me creating some of those contrast. I will just flatten this. Next part is from here, because this color here is a little bit different. It will give me a bit of a difference between the monotonous color of this rather warm image. So I do the same thing. Alt at this layer mask button. It creates a dark mask again. And then I will do the same. I will just paint this a little bit here. So this way I reduce some of the color here. Maybe I just do a little less. Flatten. So my foreground is more or less ready. One more job to do. You see there are lots of hot pixels. This is happening because it is 8 minutes exposure from a full frame camera, where the sensor gets very hot and it creates all those hot pixels. It is actually very easy to fix. You go to filter, noise, dust and scratch. Please note down these numbers. This is very important. I found this after some experiments. This works the best for it, and you see it works like a magic. All the hot pixels, bam, gone. Perfect. So our foreground is more or less ready. I save this, and we only after that keep another image. And we close some of them. We only keep one image which we will use as our human subject element. But this will be added later. Now we will open our star image again, do a Control A, Control C, and do a Control V. So that goes there. Here we will do a little selection. I could have used the sky selection tool, but honestly it doesn't work when you have a little sky in the middle, but this selection tool is much better. Now there is only one problem here. It does not understand this last part of the selection, so I will have to do that one manually. That is more or less okay. I mean, in general you can do a little bit more perfect selection on there, but for this tutorial this is probably fine. I can take away a bit of the edge from this. Very good. Now we should do one thing, because this selection is quite hard. So we will go there and say select, modify, expand. We will expand by 2 pixels, and we will again do select, modify, feather. We will feather by 0.5 pixels. Then we will make our upper layer visible and just click the layer mask. And there you go. Your stars are aligned with the foreground. Now we will remove this one, this little layer here, because you see what happens if I have to move that because I would like to push the Milky Way up a little bit. If I do like that, it will, the whole thing, the whole mask will move. So I do a Control Z, I remove this, so that kind of unlink the mask with the layer. Now we'll just select this move tool. It is called move tool. It says that actually this is the very good thing in the new version of Photoshop. That is, you can actually see tutorials immediately. You can go quick watch videos. I really like that. Not that I need it, but it's a good idea for the newcomers, for the beginners. Now I will just use the arrow key up to move the Milky Way a little bit up and place it the way I want. Probably a little bit more up, but honestly this depends. This is completely a choice of yours. You can put a little bit down, up. At the end it's all about the composition, because the more I go up, I will miss these details of the Milky Way, whereas if I stay down, I will miss this part of it. So it doesn't make that much of a difference. There are other things you can do which is not probably very nice. You can do a Control T, which will make the image larger. You can move it a little bit like this and just make it a bit larger so that you kind of cover the sky but kind of angle the Milky Way a bit more so that the whole thing comes in. But honestly, it's again not something that I like too much, because that means I'm distorting a bit the natural constellation of the sky, which is not nice, but it looks sometimes good. However, I just showed that to you, but I let you guys decide if you really want to do that or not. I would recommend not to do it, but as I've done it already, I probably leave it. It looks quite good. Now the last thing is there, which is to put the man on the mission. But the first thing what we will do is that we'll reduce a bit of noise from here. So for that, I will also use a special filter that is called Topaz Denoise. In that one, honestly, what I found is that this auto setting is already good enough. You can see how noisy it is, and it kind of does a great job here. So I will just apply that. There you go. So now we'll put again Alt and this, and put a dark mask there, and we'll bring this bottom part out. We need a full opacity there, so I'll just type in 100 and we will bring this one out. Don't worry about it, we'll take care of these edges, but let's first see what we are trying to do. Now let's zoom in it a little bit, because to fix that we have to go close. Now we are now in 300%, but after this a lot of work that we'll do is with a rather harder brush and smaller brush. First, what we'll do is that we'll bring a bit of color balance here. So we create a curve adjustment. We do a Alt click so that we get this little down arrow so that it's only impacting this below layer. Then we just select here, click some of the place and just reduce it. We reduce probably a bit of red. And that is probably good enough. And maybe we just go to the hue saturation, go down and take away some of the saturations. That's good. Now we go back there again and start painting. So this is the piece which is a bit time consuming. I would recommend that you take time to do that, because this can be a little bit boring piece of the work. So, but it's important so that it's kind of seamlessly mixed with the other part of the image. So take your time for this. So there is our man arrived in the Milky Way. Now there is one thing I want to do here. First thing is that I feel I should move this sky a little bit higher. Second part you can do is that after looking at this image, you might think that this is a little bit more brighter. You can basically add another little curve here just for this layer and create a nice S curve. You increase the contrast a little bit, but again, it's very much your personal choice. You can make it however you like it. So I will flatten this one again. Control A, Control C, Control Z, put it there. I will actually create two copies of it. One thing I don't like is that the way this human figure is distorted because the lens was pointed out. If you guys are following me for a long time, you know that I do not like distorted images. I'm a little bit tilt shift freak. Now here it was not possible to do a tilt shift because there is no 10mm tilt shift. So this I will improvise. So what I will do here is that I will go and create another camera raw filter, and I will go to this geometric distortion. And in the vertical, I will do a good -60 or something. This way you can see that the person become a little less taller. Then I will change the opacity to 50% so that I can align this image a little bit. And I will pull it down. The whole idea here is to get kind of the legs aligned. Let's go back now. I think it is good. Now let's go and try to draw back the person. And let's do a save. Let's do a flatten. File. Save as copy. And we put final. And there is the final image. Now in some cases, I got some feedback sometime that this image looks a little bit purple. To be honest, I like it this way, but if you want to change that, what you can easily do is that when we did this color adjustments there, you can go back to this camera raw image and you can just go filter, camera raw filter, and in that one where you have the color grading, you can go to the highlight and make this purple to a little bit yellowish by moving it up a little more in whatever direction you want. You can make more purple, you can make it a little bit yellowish, but make sure you do that for the highlight because you want to only touch the highlight for that. That will make things a bit more yellowish. Another way of doing it is basically adding a color balance layer, and in that one you go to the highlight and you just change the purple to greenish tint a little bit. But if you do that, then you have to make sure that you are not overexposing this. So then you just do edit, fill, black, and just paint out this part of the image. Probably with the lower opacity so that you can see the change happening. Change it to white and just make a little paint here. All the places you want to make it more yellowish, you can just paint them up, and that will go a little bit different. And if you want, you can also do the same little bit for the midtone. And this will just start changing. Honestly, I like the way it is. I do not want to change it a lot. And if you want to change the overall, you can just do one pass from there and that will change the situation. That way you can remove those purpley part little bit, and then you can play with the opacity to understand how far you want to go. But if you do that, you understand that you are creating a bit more light into this one, so you probably have to go back to another curve and create a bit of those contrast. And you can just leave it as color correction V2, and this one say so. Then if you look at it, before after, you change the purple to a little bit more yellowish, and instead of using this one, you can always use the yellowish version of the image. So let's do that quickly. I will not do everything for that. I will just flatten this. Let's do a quick copy paste. Instead of this, I will just quickly paste this one, move this up, and if I remove this too, you will see you end up with something that is a little bit more purpley. Now let's say this. There you go. That is how this image was made. I hope that this will help you taking your astrophotography to the next level. And if it does, please give us a thumbs up. That really means a lot to us. And if you have not done it already, please subscribe and press that bell icon to get notification of our upcoming adventures. Till then, ciao ciao and keep exploring.